my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt-Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place for women to come together to share their childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from women all over the world. Today's episode is sponsored by Creighton Kids. Creighton Kids is all about empowering the self-expression of families through environments that spark creativity and encourage individuality. Their versatile collection celebrates each new stage and helps you design a nursery that's an extension of your own personal style. You can use the coupon code THEBIRTHHOUR at checkout to receive 10% off your full price purchase of kids furniture and more at CreightonKids.com. It's valid online only and some exclusions apply, so see their website for details. Again, that's the code THEBIRTHHOUR at checkout at CreightonKids.com. At the end of this episode, I'll be talking about layering on finishing touches like textiles and decor to create a nursery where personal style really shines through with one of Creighton Kids' lead editors, Julia Brenner. Today's guest is Deborah. Deborah's going to be sharing her home birth story. Her labor ended up being very quick and was an accidental, unassisted home birth. Hi, Deborah. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thanks for coming on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be on.
Can you tell my listeners a little bit about you and your family?
Sure. Me and my husband recently moved from the Boston area and we just relocated to Maryland. I'm 28 years old and we recently had our first daughter last November. Hopefully we'll be able to grow our family soon, but we're just, living just in these crazy times.
All right. Well, let's go back to finding out you were pregnant with her and how your pregnancy went.
Sure. I found out I was pregnant quite early on. I believe I was about 10 DPO. So that's about 3 weeks pregnant on March 1st, 2019. And I remember I was traveling for work and I had tested the night prior while I was on my work trip and it was a negative. So I just was like, okay, I'm clearly not pregnant. And so I flew home the next evening. My husband picked me up from the airport and he was like, maybe you should take a test when we get home. And I was pretty much like, no, I'm not pregnant. And he was like, just do it. We're going to have some drinks. Maybe you should just take a test. So I literally took it just to prove him wrong that I was not pregnant. And I was extremely shocked when I saw a faint line. Prior to that, I don't believe I was having any symptoms except for maybe feeling tired, but I was traveling, so I didn't really think anything of it. And I was just very, very surprised that we got pregnant on our first try. And it was very exciting. At that time, I was 27 years old. And I've always had terrible period cramps whenever I would get my period. And so I just assumed when I got pregnant that I would have just the worst pregnancy and have extreme nausea. And I was really shocked and surprised to find out that I didn't have any symptoms at all. And it was to the point where I would sometimes just take pregnancy tests just to check if I was still pregnant. And I think after all, the most, symptoms I really got was probably just feeling tired. And then I had insomnia in the first trimester. But other than that, it was pretty uneventful pregnancy. At that time, when I did find out I was pregnant, I was still living in the Boston area. And then we ended up moving to Maryland because my husband had gotten a new job down here. And I moved when I was about 8 weeks pregnant. It was very scary. We were moving to a new state. I was just newly pregnant and we barely had any family support down here aside from one of my sisters that lived in Virginia. But I would spend a lot of time during my first trimester traveling for work. And when we ended up moving down to Maryland, I ended up finding an OBGYN and I saw the OBGYN until I could find a midwife. And I knew before I even got pregnant that I always wanted to have a midwife for my care and wanted to do a home birth. And I kind of think what shaped that was watching my eldest sister in labor. And that was in 2013. I just remember seeing her, just this sheer terror in her eyes and just watching her having to go through that, not realizing what was going on. And unfortunately, she did want to have vaginal birth, but it did end up in a C-section. And I just remember seeing that her labor just changed me. I felt like it was traumatic from my point of view. And I was just, it kind of set me on a different path of researching home births, listening to birth-related podcasts, just like the Birth Hour, and just started researching everything related to birth, pregnancy, and babies, even though this was years before I was ever going to get pregnant. And I knew that I just wanted a different experience that was just more intimate, more peaceful, and where I kind of felt like I had a little bit more control. And so when I did get pregnant, I instantly knew I wanted to find a midwife. But it did take a little bit of convincing my husband to do this. He was like, I don't want to do any of your, hippie crunchy ways. And I'm just like, trust me, I think it'll be like the best option just for the both of us. And I did end up getting him on board with that. And I ended up interviewing quite a few different midwives and different practices. And I ended up deciding on my midwife around 15 weeks. And she's just lovely. She was a former attorney and judge, and just decided to drop her whole career and become a midwife. And I love that she was just a little bit crunchy, but she also approached midwifery with like kind of evidence-based midwifery. And she always encouraged me to research my choices and to be active in my care and not just go with whatever she just said, but to actually research the decisions that I was making. And I continued to get care from my OB for ultrasounds and blood work. And then I ended up stopped going around 28 weeks and then just continued with my midwife. And it was, again, pretty uneventful. And my husband and I took Bradley method classes just to kind of help prepare for labor and birth. And I found that, or we both found that to be kind of really helpful, just to help prepare him to how to respond to me in this time where I may not be super responsive. But we found that to be just really helpful.
I just love your background about your midwife. It's so interesting.
Yeah, she's amazing. It was like finding someone who was super academic and then just decided just to become a midwife and went and studied at the farm and went abroad to study as well. And she's great.
Awesome. And then as far as convincing your husband, do you have any tips there for people who are in the same boat? I know that's kind of a common thing that comes up.
One of the things that we did, when I was trying to convince him, was I'd randomly just put on I'd find peaceful home birth videos. And we kind of did a little bit of research together as well. I think he also was a little bit more convinced. Whenever I would go to the OB's office, I'm not sure if I would just get anxiety, but they would test my blood pressure and it would be sky high. But then we would get home and I would test my blood pressure at home and it was relatively low, like it normally was. And I guess he realized that I just kind of felt more anxious whenever I was at the doctor's office. And it was more solidified when the midwife would come to our home and we would do all the vitals and everything was super calm and super low. And he was like, I think this is the best choice for you and us, just seeing how much you're at ease.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so anything else from your pregnancy that came up that you want to talk about?
I think I started to get really anxious when I was starting to hit 38 weeks. I started to get anxious about going into labor, and I started to just get this adamant feeling where I knew I didn't want to go super late. I don't know why. I just had this huge, well, actually, I know why. I had a fear of having a large baby, and I was thinking that it would probably make a hard time for me to deliver. And I had this fear because my husband, who was born at 36 weeks, he was born about 8 pounds. And I'm just like, I'm terrified I'm going to have this massive child. So I did have quite a bit of anxiety towards the last couple of weeks of my pregnancy.
Were there any helpful things that were able to ease your anxiety at all?
One of the things that kind of helped ease my anxiety, I would do a little bit of meditation, listening to birth stories, positive birth stories. I really, really, really tried to protect my mental space a lot. I tried to block out any birth stories I know friends and family who were they're not trying to be mean, but they'll tell horror stories. And I really tried to protect my space and blocking all of those out, watching peaceful home births, and just really meditating about that, trying to, speak into existence, having a good birth. And I think that really helped ease my anxiety.
Yeah. All right. So how did labor start for you?
So labor started, it was kind of weird. My mother had come down at 38 weeks to be with us just to help for the first month after my birth. And I would ask her, how do I know that I'm in labor? What do contractions feel like? And the only thing she would ever tell me is, you'll know because it hurts. And I was like, I feel like that's not helpful. Like, for someone who had 4 children, why don't you know? So the day I went to labor, I was 40 weeks and 2 days. And this was on November 17th. And I remember I woke up at 6 a.m. And I felt fine, but I remember I went to the bathroom to pee, and I peed as normal. And I pulled up my underwear, and I remember feeling it being soaking wet. I didn't think anything of it because, during the last couple of weeks of pregnancy, things just get juicy, as my midwife would say. So I just didn't think about it. I just put on a new pair of underwear and I went right back to bed to sleep. And then I ended up waking up again around like 7:30 or 8. And I was sleeping on my right side. And I remember turning over and felt a tiny little trickle down my inner thigh. And I got up, I went to the bathroom, I checked, and it was just like clear. It looked like clear fluid, almost as if I peed myself, but I knew I didn't pee myself. So I went to my mother and I told her, and she was like, I think your water may have broken. But I wasn't sure because it wasn't a slow leak or like a flow. I just felt it that one instance. So I put on a pad and went to lay down. And my mom thought if this was labor, it's a good idea to probably eat something now before you don't want to eat anything. So I remember I made myself some oatmeal. And I was sitting down talking to my mom, and I was eating, and I remember I got the biggest urge to go vomit. Throughout my whole pregnancy, I never threw up once, and I never had nausea. And so I was like, this is very, very weird. So I finished eating, and around 11:30, I ended up calling my midwife to explain what I was feeling. And I told her it wasn't a slow trickle, but when I would lay down, if I moved or shifted, I would feel just a little bit of water. And so she suggested that I get on the ball or try moving around, walking around, and seeing if more fluid comes out. And of course, 2 hours later, nothing, the pad was dry and nothing had happened. So around noon, my husband and I just decided to go take a really, really long walk just to see if we can get either more fluid or contractions to start if this was labor. And I remember we did a walk for about an hour and a half around our whole neighborhood, and nothing happened. I think maybe on that walk, I probably had one Braxton Hicks, and that was pretty much it. So we got home, and around 2, we took a nap, a really, really long nap, and then we just laid there. I know this is going to be a bit TMI, but I remember that cold day. After that, I remember I kept going to the bathroom to poop multiple times that day. And it should have been a sign in my head that something may happen, but I think I was just too tired in pregnancy brain to realize that. But my husband and I just ended up spending the rest of the day just relaxing and hanging out and watching TV. And I remember around 8 p.m., my twin sister ended up coming to stop by and see how we were doing. And I remember as she was leaving, she joked around and was like, you better not go into labor and call me as I just left your place now. And I was like, I highly doubt I'm going into labor. We thought this all day and nothing has happened. And so she left. And then around 9 p.m., me and my husband just decided to walk around our apartment building. We did stairs, lunges, and I felt nothing. We went to sit on the couch afterward. I think we only walked for half an hour. And around 10 p.m., we went to watch TV on our couch. And I was kind of feeling tired. So I told him, let's just go sit in our bedroom and we could watch TV there. So we were watching TV for about an hour, and I was trying to relax. I was doing deep inhales that I learned in childbirth class. And then out of nowhere at 11:15, I remember, I can't I tried to explain this to other people, but I can't explain it, but it just felt like an internal pop. I honestly, that's the only thing I can describe it as. And I was like, that is bizarre. And I got up and I went to the bathroom. And when I looked in the toilet, it was my mucus plug. And so I got up and I told my husband my mucus plug had come out. And then instantly I started to feel what felt like period cramps. And it was the kind that like made me wince. And I was just like, is this what my mom described as when you're in labor, you'll know? And so I ended up texting my sister around 11:30 and told her I was feeling some contractions, but it'll probably be a long, long time before anything were to happen if I am in real labor. My husband and I decided to pray. And then literally after we finished praying together, I started to have intense cramps, and it felt nothing like Braxton Hicks. And I had remembered one of my friends had told me when she had her children, every time labor started, she described it as almost like Braxton Hicks, where it would just feel like tightening and it was timeable. And that's every time I remember when I was thinking about going into labor, the only thing I thought of what contractions felt like was just probably harder Braxton Hicks of tightening. But to me, it just felt like intense cramps. And then I remember doing research sometime later, and I found out that not all women feel contraction in the same way. Some people can feel it in different areas or feel the sensation in a different way. And that was mind blowing to me because I was basing what I thought was going to happen to me off of her experience. And it was completely different from me. And I remember, so by midnight, I was having contractions about every 5 to 7 minutes apart. And it was to the point where I had to breathe through them. And I remember thinking, this is not what I learned in childbirth class when they said that it starts off slow and maybe every 15 to 20 minutes. And I was having this every 5 to 7 minutes. So we called my midwife to tell her my mucus plug had come out and I started having contractions. And her advice was, put her, she told my husband to put me in the tub with some Epsom salt to see because sometimes she said if your mucus plug comes out, it can just cause contractions. It may not be that you're going into labor right now. So I laid in the tub for about an hour and they were uncomfortable. And at that point, I think they were coming sometimes every 2 minutes, sometimes every 5 minutes or 7 minutes. And then at times they were back to back and it was extremely intense. I think I ended up getting out around 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I started to have I remember I went to the bathroom and wiped and I was starting to see I can't remember what it's called, but I think pink discharged and all that stuff. And so my husband told me, maybe we should probably lay down and try and get some sleep before anything happens. And I was like, that's a good idea. And my husband, he has allergies. And I remember actually before we had gone to bed earlier, he had taken a Benadryl. So he was like, I'm kind of feeling sleepy. Let's try and get some sleep before, everything picks up a lot harder. And I was like, okay, let's go to bed. And I remember when we were laying in bed, every time I would have a contraction, I was just squeezing his hands. And I knew I wasn't going to get much sleep. So I told him, maybe you should go sleep on the couch and I'll just kind of labor in here for a bit. So my husband went and laid on the couch. And so I just was laboring in the room and it just got more intense from there. By then I was having contractions every 5 minutes. And for some odd reason, for someone who researched a lot about birth, it never occurred to me that you should probably alert the midwife, especially if they were coming. So they were coming at that frequency and they were super intense and holding for about a minute, sometimes a minute and a half. And I remember by 3 a.m., I was wondering that I was definitely thinking I was not going to get through this. I remember thinking, okay, when I have my period and they're bad, I go and get some Tylenol. So I went and grabbed Tylenol thinking it was going to work like some kind of epidural. And I took a Tylenol, and of course it didn't work. And I was thinking, I'm going to the hospital to get an epidural because this is insane. Why did I think this was a great idea to decide to have a home birth? This is why people go to the hospital. And I was laboring. And then I remember just sitting on the toilet when I would get a contraction. And then after that, I would jump into bed and try and sleep in between them. And I remember it was actual deep sleep in between those, like maybe like couple of minutes in between contractions. And then every time I felt them coming up, I would dash and sit on the toilet uncomfortably. And when the toilet stopped working for me, I remember having to, every contraction, get up and walk back and forth in my bedroom, back and forth. The heating pad did not work for me. I just felt, I don't know how to explain it, but I felt like I was going to die. And obviously I wasn't going to die, but that's just the feeling I felt. And I didn't experience any back labor. I felt it only in my front. And I know it felt like intense period cramps, but I think it was also pressure coming down as well. And I remember at one point I had fallen asleep on the bed for just a couple of minutes. And then it almost felt like I had the spins, and I jumped out of bed and ran into the bathroom, and I threw up everywhere. And once I threw up, I knew I needed to wake up my husband and wake up my mother. And I told my husband, like, I think you need to call the midwife. I think this is getting serious. And in my head, I knew I wanted to go to the hospital. And I asked my mother if she can get up and clean up the throw up while I was still having contractions. And in my mind, I didn't realize I was hitting transition. I remember my husband was asking me what I was feeling because he was trying to speak to the midwife, and I was not vocal. And I felt my whole body light up in goosebumps. And I started to shake, and I couldn't vocalize what was happening to me, and I didn't understand it. My mom was looking at me, and she knew I was just about to have the baby. And she was like, you need to get the midwife here. But in my mind, I'm thinking, I've only been at this a few hours now, and I don't think the midwife's going to believe me as a first-time mom that I think I'm about to have this baby. So I'm like, I'm telling my mom, I'm trying to vocalize to my mom, I think I have time. And she's looking at me like, I think you're about to have the baby. So I told my husband, you need to get the tub ready and you guys need to make the bed. My mom ran and made the bed. And my husband, he was very, very still disoriented. I think he was feeling the effects of the Benadryl. Also, he had just woken up. And so he can't understand that I think I'm further along than I was for a lot further along, but he didn't think that way either. And I remember we were in the kitchen at this point, and the kitchen was bright light because they had turned on all the lights, and it's around 4:30 in the morning. And I told him, just get everything ready. I'm going to go sit in the bathroom again with the lights off. And at this point, I was feeling the most intense contractions. And the whole time when I was contracting in my bedroom, I was silent the whole time I was in labor. And this point, I couldn't be silent anymore. I remember I was having those deep, almost tribal moans. And my husband told me later on, he was like, I heard you moaning, and I'd never heard that from you before. And he was starting to feel frantic. And I think the advice my husband, after he'd spoken to the midwife, she also didn't think I was that far along. I'm assuming she probably thought I was probably not coping well with labor. Since it was only 4 hours since I had called her the first time at midnight. And so she told my husband to get me something to eat, and try and see if she'll get some sleep before she heads over. And, while I was in the bathroom, like still having those contractions, I remember thinking, I need to get some sleep. I cannot get through this if I do not sleep. So I tried to go to the couch to lay down for a bit, and it was very uncomfortable. I couldn't lay down. I was moaning so loud. And I kept thinking, I swear everybody in this apartment building is going to hear me. My husband I could still see him fumbling around trying to assemble this pool. And I told my mom and my husband that I was going to go try and take a shower to see if these contractions would even out. And I think by this point, I wasn't even timing them because they were coming super frequent. They were coming so frequently. And I remember going into the shower, and it was the best feeling. It just felt like all the pain had melted away for just a bit. And I remember having my most clarity at this point. I was looking at my stomach, I was doing my deep breaths, and I was just loving this hot shower that I was taking. And then I remember having one contraction, and it brought me to my knees. And I remember just laying there, and the shower tub started to fill up with water. And again, still not realizing I'm about to have a baby, I still think I have time. And I remember just laying there in the water, laying there. And I decided to just try and see if I could feel anything. And so I was not knowing, I was rubbing the baby's head. I didn't know that was the head. I just thought I was swollen. And then I felt this crazy urge to bear down. And I remember bearing down twice, and it was like the loudest noise. And my mom came into the bathroom, and she pulled the shade to the shower, and she was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And she's like, "I think you need to get out of the shower now." And I was like, "Nope, I feel fine." And I remember closing the shade, and she was like, and then she heard me bear down again. And she was like, my husband's name is Mike. She's like, "Mike, she is pushing. You guys need to get the midwife here now." And that's the first time I'd ever heard my mom, because my mom is the most level-headed woman, and I could hear it in her voice that she knew the baby was coming, and I didn't even know that the baby was coming. So my husband runs and calls the midwife, and I can hear him on the phone saying, "Debbie is pushing, she's pushing." And I hear my midwife pause for a second, and she was like, "Where is Deborah?" And he was like, "She's in the tub." She's like, "Get her out of the shower and get her in bed. Are you guys sure?" And he was like, "Yes." And so my husband came over to me. My midwife's still on the phone. And I said, "Is that the baby's head, or am I swollen?" And he looks, and he's like, "Debbie, that's the head." And I could see the color almost drain from my husband's face. So my midwife had him try and carefully bring me to the bed. And I was in the bathroom that's adjoined to my bedroom. And he luckily got me into the bed. And my midwife was like, "Try and get on all fours." So I got on all fours. And I remember, again, like I felt super clear. The contractions were now coming every maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And I was having a break. And I remember talking and laughing a little bit. And I was like, "I know this is going to sound super annoying, but pushing does not hurt. Why does everyone say pushing hurts?" And my midwife was like, "You need to focus now. Put all your attention and energy into this." And I was telling her, I'm like, "It doesn't hurt. It feels really, really good." And I think I had done a couple of pushes in bed, and within a few pushes, her head was out. And my midwife was like, "I'm on the way. I'm only 15 minutes away at this point. I will be there. I'm rushing on my way." And I remember hearing my mother calling my twin sister and was like, "You need to get here now. Debbie is pushing." And my twin sister was like, "Wait, what?" She had sent me a text at 11:30 saying, everything was okay. And she was just having a little bit of cramps. And she was like, "I'm on my way." And my mom, she's had 4 kids. And for some reason, she's very, very squeamish around birth or anything related to that. And I remember seeing her throw some towels to my husband, but she's like, "I can't be in here. I can't see this." And I remember I think I had a little break, and then one more push, and her body just kind of came out, and it felt almost like Jello. Or I can't, that's the experience it felt for me. It just felt like the rest of her body just came out like Jello. I'm not sure. I didn't really feel the ring of fire. It just kind of felt like if you snap, like if you're putting on like sterile gloves and it kind of snaps, that's exactly what it felt like when her head just kind of popped through. And I remember my husband was holding her, and before we knew it was a girl, we had decided not to find out her gender, or find out the gender of the baby. And my husband held her, and I remember sitting on all fours first a while, waiting for the midwife to get here. And she was saying, check for the cord, make sure the cord's not around the baby's neck. And my husband was telling her it wasn't. And so she was like, okay. I remember she arrived about shortly after the baby was born. And she came in, and I could tell she was frazzled. And I'm assuming maybe it was because she missed the birth. And on top of that, I don't think she realized that I was going to labor for such a short amount of time and deliver that quickly. And I think right after the midwife came, she helped me to lay on my back. And then they ended up passing the baby to me. And I remember asking my husband, so what is it? And he looks, I never thought to look down. So he looks down and he's like, it's a girl. And I remember being shocked, but not really, because everybody in my family had convinced me it was a boy. But I remember when I'd first gotten pregnant, I told my husband I felt like we were going to have a girl. So I was kind of surprised, but then kind of not, when we found out it was a girl. But by the time my midwife came, and then her midwife assistant had come, I was already laying in bed holding the baby. And my sister got there about 15 or so minutes after the baby was born. And I remember she walked in and she was like, did I miss it? And I was like, yeah, the baby's here. She was like, you're kidding me. I can't believe you had the baby that quickly. And I'm like, you're talking. And I think at this point, I probably looked delirious, and I was still in a lot of shock that I could have the baby so quickly. I had prepared my whole mind set to know that I was probably going to have a 12 to maybe 24 to 48 hour labor. Never prepared myself for such a short labor. And I remember after they were laying me down and they were examining me, and the midwife had said that I didn't really bleed all that much and I didn't have any tears. And I think I ended up delivering the placenta about 30 or 40 minutes later. I wasn't feeling much contractions at that point. And I think around the 30 to 40 minute mark, my midwife was kind of thinking we probably should get this placenta delivered. So she had me do some pushes when I felt a little bit of a contraction. And then the placenta ended up being delivered, and I didn't have any bleeding after that. But yeah, that's my crazy fast labor and delivery story.
So fast, and all of that talk about pushing, not hurting, and feeling like putting a glove on. I'm like, what? That's amazing.
It felt like a snap. That's what it felt like. It literally felt almost. I'm assuming maybe because I don't know. Before I delivered, I was awaiting the water, so maybe things got a chance to soften up. So it didn't hurt. I guess contractions to me hurt. I don't know.
I've had some water bursts and it still hurt. Oh, that's awesome, though. You're stretchy, maybe.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, I guess I just assumed that contractions hurt so bad that this maybe like doing that counter pressure against or pushing with it hurt a lot less. So maybe it just in my mind didn't hurt all that much.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was born and she was 8 pounds, 4 ounces. So not too big. And she was 22 inches. So super long.
Yeah. And how was your postpartum experience?
My postpartum experience was wonderful. And I attribute that to my mother being there. I talked about this with my mother since now months later. And I'm thinking women who do deliver and they don't have that help, my heart goes out because I couldn't imagine me and my husband getting through the postpartum period without my mother being there. Because there were nights that she helped with the baby. taking her when we felt like we needed some sleep. And she ended up staying with us for just about a month. It was wonderful. She latched instantly after birth and ate like a champion. And we did breastfeed, and my milk came in, I think, about 24 hours after I'd given birth. Yeah, it was, luckily I had my mother there, and she was really, really able to help and be there for me. And I can't imagine not having that help. And my heart goes out to people who don't have it. But it was, I'm very fortunate to have that support, my family support and his family support as well.
Yeah, so nice to have support. Do you have any other resources that you want to mention?
Yes. Again, I did do a lot of research when I was pregnant. I loved reading Ina May Gaskin's book, The Guide to Childbirth. We did do Bradley Method classes. I believe that was a 12-week course. I think I also did the Spinning Babies. They had this DVD that like kind of helped with keeping the baby in shape or in kind of the best positions. Mm-hmm. So I think I used their yoga. I think it was a yoga DVDs. I also went to the chiropractor quite a bit when I was pregnant. And I'd suggest if anyone's pregnant, if they're able to do that, to go to the chiropractor if they can and get adjusted. I definitely think it helped, especially when I had my fear of having long labor, or my fear of just a lot of anxiety within the last couple of weeks. I went to the chiropractor quite a bit just to get adjusted and hopefully keep the baby in the right position.
Yeah, I'm all for the chiropractor too, especially like third trimester. It's so nice.
Yeah, I think at one point I was going probably like couple of times a week just to, especially with back pain and everything like that. It definitely helps.
Definitely. All right. And then where should people go to connect with you online?
Oh, people can connect with me on Instagram. They can search Deborah Michelle. It's DEBORAH and MICHEL.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was a pleasure.
Now I'm going to talk to Julia from Crate & Kids, today's sponsor. And don't forget, you can use the coupon code THEBIRTHHOUR at crateandkids.com for 10% off your purchase. Hi, Julia. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today to chat with me about Crate & Kids.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you tell my listeners just a little bit about who you are and what you do at Crate & Kids?
Sure. I'm Julia Brenner, and at Crate & Kids, I have a couple of roles. I am in charge of our blog, which is called The Easel, and so that's our content hub for lots of editorial storytelling around seasonal trends, new products, things that our customers really seem interested in. We'll do deep dives. So that's one part. And then I'm also a lead writer. So I'm in charge of pulling together the storytelling around our campaigns and our products.
Sounds like a really fun job. And like you're the perfect person for me to be talking to today, because we're going to talk a little bit about just kind of like pulling together the whole style of your nursery. In the past, we've gotten really specific talking about like just cribs and stuff like that. But today we're going to cover a little bit of everything. So let's just get right into it. One of the first things that I know a lot of people are seeing when they're creating their registry and starting to decorate their nursery are a lot of neutral colors with nursery decor. Why do you think that neutrals are so popular these days?
You are absolutely right. Neutrals are definitely having a moment. And I think it has a lot to do with parents really wanting their nurseries to feel like an extension of the rest of their home. So instead of like pink or blue, people are really wanting serene, soothing vibes and these sort of feel-good tones that make their space feel cozy, but also more elevated. And so we're seeing a lot of beautiful neutral color stories. Like we have a mid-century two-tone crib and dresser that it's natural wood and it's a very sort of soft palette. It's very cozy, but it also has an elevated feel. So that is definitely one of the trends that we're seeing. I think in the past, people thought neutral is equal to boring or beige, and that's really not the case. Neutrals can be incredibly gorgeous. So if you think about something like gorgeous natural wood, like a rich walnut crib layered with like soft linen bedding, and then maybe like a pop of warmth from like a cream shag rug, that together is this like beautiful push and pull of texture and tone that feels, like I was saying, elevated, but also super cozy and warm. So I think when thinking about those elements and thinking about neutrals in that way, a neutral nursery is becoming incredibly desirable for new parents.
Yeah, and I love that you talked about some of the bigger items like cribs and rugs and stuff like that, because if you have those as neutrals, it kind of gives you more freedom to have some really fun, pops of color, like with the toys and things like that.
Absolutely. And there's also an element of versatility in using neutral pieces like that, because if you have, for instance, some people are putting their crib or putting the makings of a nursery into something like their own master bedroom. And so in that case, you're going to want pieces that mix well and feel good with the whole space. Or if you are incorporating a nursery into, you have an older sibling. And so you're trying to create a nursery space that works with, in a shared bedroom situation. That's another great place where neutrals can work really well, because they're just sort of, it's this palette that looks good anywhere. And so that's incredibly desirable right now.
Definitely. So speaking of items that can kind of grow with the family, what are some of your furniture items that are beautiful and will last beyond just the baby years?
So multi-purpose is another big trend that we're seeing. Young parents are increasingly interested in furniture that can transition from a nursery either to their child's room when their child is older. So that could be something like a convertible crib that can work really well as a toddler bed. Mm-hmm. So we have our mid-century line can work as a crib, but then it can be moved and work as a full-size bed. So their child can have it from the time they're a baby through, the elementary school years. And it's not only a beautiful piece for one stage of their child's life, it grows with the child. And when you're buying a big ticket item, it's really nice to know that you can have this item for years to come, because it makes it feel like more of a value. And that's definitely something that we're seeing. Another thing that people are looking for are things like rocking chairs or gliders that they can use in the nursery, but also transition maybe out to a family room or the home office. So again, like pieces that are very comfortable and very welcoming in a nursery space, but also sophisticated and elevated enough to work in more of a family room setting.
Yeah, I love that. Sometimes when I'm on Crate and Kids, I forget that it's not Crate and Barrel, because so much of it is so versatile and things that I would want in my room as much as I would want in a nursery. So it's very neat.
And that's one of the things that I think is really exciting about our current offering and our current collections is that they really speak to an element of high design, and they're incredibly well designed. And a lot of the things that our customers are excited by, there's a lot of attention to detail and a lot of craft that is put into something like a dresser or a rocking chair. So those sort of high design elements that can help a piece transition out of the nursery when their baby becomes older.
Yeah, and I love the sustainability aspect of it too, just knowing that it's not like I just think of my little brother's dressing table or changing table when I was a little girl, and it was so rickety. I'm sure it just went to the dump after like a year or two, and having like a really high quality item that can then become a dresser. I just love that.
Yeah.
All right, so what about smaller items for the nursery like textiles and decor? What are some ways that you can like incorporate those neutrals without it just feeling a little too blah in the room?
So one thing that I think is fantastic when you're thinking about neutrals is you can stick to a very sort of soothing, calm, serene, maybe it's creams or maybe it's gray tones color palette. But if you add interesting texture, that's where you can have a lot of fun and add depth and warmth. So I love thinking about like a chunky knit blanket and a really like gorgeous ivory or a rich cream. So the color might not be, it might not blow your socks off, but the texture might. And so that's where you can have a lot of fun. Or something like we have this really cute pom-pom rug, and the texture is really playful and there's a lot of depth to it, but it comes in a neutral tone. So I love the idea of playing with texture and textiles while keeping that soothing, serene color palette. I think those two elements work really nicely together to create this sort of balanced, soothing, yet visually interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about babies like playing on the floor and they just love texture. So I think that's another cool aspect of it too.
Absolutely. And you can also play with tones. You can play within the same palette. So you could do something like stick with a white color family and start with a crisp white as, maybe your bedding, or maybe your rug is like this gorgeous crisp white, but then you can mix in creamy ivories and sort of neutral, rich beiges. And then you have the same color family, but you have, again, that level of visual interest and layers. So there's lots of ways to play with neutral textiles.
Awesome. Okay, I have one more question here. I recently learned the term shelfie, but I think I'm a little late to this trend. So if anybody else is like me and hasn't heard of a shelfie, it's this trend of styling your shelf and really taking it beyond just, books and bookends. So have you been seeing this in nurseries? I'm sure you guys are styling them on your website and the blog. So tell me all your tips.
Yes, nursery shelfies are definitely a thing. And it makes sense when you think about it, because setting up a nursery is such a special project, and it's really a time to showcase a mix of personal style. And for many of us, it's also a chance to bring in our personal treasures. So family heirlooms or items that are very meaningful to us. And when you put that all together, you have the makings of a great shelfie. So the shelfie is the term for taking a gorgeous shot of your bookshelf or your vignette and posting it on Instagram and having everybody see this gorgeous moment in your nursery. And it is definitely something that we're seeing a lot of people doing, because it's exciting to show the world, this room and this space that you're creating for your new family. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's a tricky thing to do, creating a selfie. It should be fun and it should be something that you enjoy doing. But there are a couple little tricks. So I would say that the secret to a great shelfie is to start with, you can use a blank shelf or a blank wall or even an empty corner of the room. And then start by adding in a mix of decor and personal items. So if you're styling something like a bookshelf, think in terms of layers. So you might want to have really pretty decorative storage baskets on the bottom shelf. So those will be functional. You'll store blankets or diapers or things that you really need to have access to in these beautiful storage baskets. So that can be your first layer. And then the middle layer can be a variety of beautiful books and cute toys, fun decor pops. And then on the top shelf, or maybe even framing the shelf on the wall, is an opportunity to incorporate personal photographs, meaningful artwork, beautiful framed pieces that really round out the look of your shelfie. So it's sort of like a layer cake, but in decor.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that storage bins, like you said, pretty storage bins are like my key to having a clean house. Even now with older kids, it's just put one in every room. And then when you're doing a quick cleanup, you can throw all the toys into a pretty storage bin and it feels like you have a clean house. So.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. One of the things I think all parents learn very quickly is the storage bin life.
Yeah.
It's like learn it, live it, love it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing with me. It was so great to talk to you.
Oh, I've so enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much again to Deborah for sharing her birth story and to Creighton Kids for sponsoring this episode. To find the show notes for this episode, head over to thebirthhour.com and search for Deborah's name in the search bar. We'd also like to say a big thank you to all of our listener supporters via Patreon. These are our super fans who pledge at $5 or more a month to help support the podcast, and with that pledge, they get extra bonuses like access to our private Facebook group, all of our archived episodes, bonus content each month, and some fun things coming up like a really big giveaway when we hit our goal of 1,000 patrons. We're so close. If you head over to patreon.com/birthhour, you can see just how close we are and become a member yourself. Again, that's patreon.com/birthhour. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.